Hey everyone, I am David Berkowitz, back with another edition of AI Insiders from AI Marketers Guild, part of the Marketecture Media family. And we've got a couple of special guests here today, including the author of this terrific book I picked up. Just stumbled on this at my local bookseller. But it doesn't hurt that I've had the pleasure of knowing the author, Lisa Davis, of The Only Woman in the Room: How to Win in a Workplace That Is Still exclamation point built for men. And it's a really powerful story. It's a mix of like, wow, how the hell did she pull that off? And some even I thought I've been in some high pressure scenarios, whether in through the corporate world and all that, but what Lisa's dealt with through the military and government sectors, let alone the corporate ones, it's like Lisa, sounds like you've had your share of challenges, and pretty amazing to see how you've overcome them and some of the advice that you give to others. And then we're joined with another powerhouse yourself, Kathleen Murphy of Murphy Media Partners, and someone who I've gotten to know as well over the years, and just been one of the savviest folks in the comms world that there is, and so Kathleen has helped put this all together and will take the reins. So great for you to be here, and just as most of you know by now, this is a community conversation, not a standard webinar. So as there are things that you want to make sure that we cover today, and that Lisa especially gets into, by all means, put stuff in the chat, and we'll have time for more interactive Q&A. So Kathleen, Lisa, thanks for joining us.
Hey, David, thanks so much. Great to be here. And good morning or good afternoon. I'm on the West Coast, everybody. So thanks for joining today. And thank you, Kathleen, for being my partner in crime here.
Our plan is to I'll talk to Lisa, do a little bit of interview with her for 10 or 15 minutes so you can get a little bit of a background on the book. Then we really want to open it up for David to ask some questions, and we'll stir the whole group. Again, as David said, we want this to be very interactive and a very easy, informal conversation. So I'll start. We have some men on the call here and women on the call both. So, which is a fantastic thing, because I've read the book and I don't consider it just a woman's book. I consider it a leadership book. It is not your typical women's leadership book either. And I would say it's for anyone that feels like they're in the minority, whether they're walking into a meeting with a contrary opinion, whether they are the only woman in the room, the only man in the room, whether they've got an initiative they want to launch and they want to get teammates to follow them. This is a book about how to navigate those kinds of situations. So I'll throw to you, Lisa. Is that the kind of book you set out to write when you started?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's interesting. I wrote the book initially really for anyone who has ever experienced, as you said, being the only, and how to navigate and frankly persevere through a system. And I talk about a system that's still built for men, or a workplace still built for men, because the workplace was created after World War II, right? The workplace was created where the man went to work, the woman stayed home and raised the kids. And we know that's not current state of how, what reality is today. Where over 50% of women are certainly working. Of that majority of women working, 60% are primary breadwinners. So the workplace hasn't shifted to support, I'll say, the modern family, where most of us are. If you do have a partner, you're married with children, both of you are likely working in today's reality. And what are the key skills that I learned over a 40-year career through, as David mentioned, Department of Defense, academia, high tech, and in healthcare before I started my own company? What were the core leadership principles that I had to learn in order to continue persevering towards my long-term personal professional goals? And that's who the book is written for. And in this era of AI that we are in, I believe those 9 principles that we can talk about those are probably more important than ever in terms of how we navigate with leaders, how we succeed in today's work environment.
So back to the system, right? Is this built for women? It seems that, do you see an opportunity here now, Lisa? Or let's like, we took AI out of it. Question would be, how do you change the system, right? How do you change that workplace, how it's set up, the structure of it? But is there an opportunity now with AI that is just democratically swept over all offices, all leadership tiers? Is there an opportunity now with all the disruptive change going on with AI? Do you think for women or minorities, those the only? Do you think there's an opportunity here to change the system, or is it going to make it harder?
I don't know if AI is going to make it easier. I mean, frankly, it takes leaders, administration, government policies to understand, because these are core infrastructure issues. So it's a great question in terms of whether certainly AI democratizes access to data, access to content, the way that we're currently working changes many of those. But in terms of core infrastructure issues, when I say the system, I'm talking about flexible work policies. I'm talking about paid family leave. I'm talking about affordable childcare in this country. All of those reasons why women and diverse leaders drop out of the workplace because the system makes it very difficult to manage both career and personal lives if you want to bring those together. So can AI help us from a core infrastructure issue? I don't know. I'd love to hear what the audience has to say about that, because to me, it's leadership. It's our current administration, which we're certainly getting opposite or negative vibes on that. Frankly, women just staying home. Why bother having a career, frankly? And so part of what the book calls for is a call to action. Those of us that do make it to executive and leadership roles, we have the power to influence or change policies in our own workplaces in terms of how do we handle paid family leave, childcare? Do I offer childcare on my premises? So there's all these different types of solutions. And what is it going to take to actually make that happen? And I believe it needs to start at a federal level. Maybe it comes down to a state level, and then companies can take the power and influence in their own corporations with their employees.
Back to drill in a little bit back on the role of the leader of the company now, right? I mean, David has mentioned there's a lot of stress with AI. A
lot of stress. Yeah.
There's the gap between when a CEO is asked whether their company is AI ready, and they say, sure, yes, they are. We're very up to date. And you ask the employees and they say, I don't know. Nope, not really. They're all the challenges of how you teach your workforce to embrace an AI. They're going to be those that are on the sidelines, those that are new adopters, right? So where do you see leadership being under stress now in different ways than it was before, whether it's female leadership or male leadership?
Oh, I think it doesn't matter what gender you are, frankly. I talk to a lot of leaders. Let me just give a little background in case folks don't know what my background is or didn't get a chance. I was a chief information officer, technology executive for 40 years of my career through those 4 different sectors that I mentioned. The last 2 roles were 5 years at Intel, and then the last 5 years at Blue Shield of California. And what I hear from leaders today as I consult with healthcare companies and do executive coaching and mentoring is that I am exhausted. I am tired. I'm having a hard time self-regulating. There is so much complexity. The pace is moving faster than I have ever experienced before. And frankly, I don't know which end is up, because that pressure is certainly coming from the boardroom, certainly coming from the CEO. And then, as we all know, if you've driven major transformation, and I've driven transformations, digital transformations my entire career in each of those sectors, we all know for it to be successful, it starts at the top. It starts at the top and it has to be aligned all the way down to the bottom. And what we're finding in organizations today is, oh, we'll just throw it over to the IT team or the digital team, and they become the scapegoat, and there's little accountability on the business side in terms of really understanding where to apply the technology. And the rule number one that I always give when I'm working with my clients today is never start with the technology first. Mm-hmm. Start with the business workflows. Start with where you can drive ROI, where you can drive meaningful change, where you can drive business outcomes. Prioritize, and that requires everyone across the company to get aligned, have joint accountability, bake that accountability and incentives into the infrastructure. What do I mean by that? Performance plans, incentives, the conversations when we show up in an operations committee and we're looking at a dashboard and says, whoa, why is it that that business unit isn't aligned to what we're doing? So anytime you drive major transformation, whether it was cloud, whether it was digital, and now we hear in AI, the reason AI is failing in the enterprise, that recent MIT report that said, 90% of enterprises are not showing an ROI in the adoption of AI. Well, these are the reasons why, in terms of the governance, the frameworks, the funding alignment, the prioritization alignment, that has to occur in an enterprise for a transformation, a new technology to take hold, right? And be brought in throughout the organization in terms of how we're going to use it. And AI is so, there's so many different components of it, of how it can be applied. That's where the alignment needs to occur within an organization. And you can't have silos going off and doing their own thing and picking the latest point solution or the latest bot, because now I have chaos. And certainly from a cyber standpoint, from an architectural standpoint, that's just going to make for a very messy environment and a very difficult environment to maintain, not only from a cost perspective, but also from a cyber perspective. So a little bit there.
To travel a little further down the path to the challenges of leadership.
Oh, yeah.
Parallel to your book and how you structured it. You mentioned early on the construction of the book and the qualities that leaders need to have. I'll mention them here. So the chapters are organized under these qualities: grit, power, belief, connection, authenticity, strength, rest. We like rest. We don't like rest. Wine is not in here, Lisa. I don't understand why wine is not in here, but
wine is incorporated through all the chapters, right?
Just a running theme.
It's a running underlying theme, underlying thread.
Wealth and impact. Again, for this audience, right? The AI group here, and through that AI lens, any of those qualities particularly more important now with AI leading the AI transformation? Or you think they're still all equally as valuable?
Oh man, I mean, let's just start with grit. Grit, and I love, you think about Angela Duckworth's famous TED Talk, right? What is grit? Passion and perseverance towards a long-term sustained goal. What I talk about in the grit chapter is another word that I felt was missing, because we all know passion ebbs and flows. One of those days when you wake up and you're like, not sure how I'm going to make it today. And that's where the word conviction comes in, right? And I think in this, as a leader in AI today, grit, perseverance, conviction to stay the course, to stay flexible, adaptable. Certainly as in my role as a technology executive, I really view my role as a translator across the enterprise. And in many of your roles, I believe you're AI marketers. How is that content being leveraged through the organization? It's interesting when you think about authenticity as a chapter, We have now, for the first time, I don't know, in history, access to whatever content at my fingertips I need. What's lacking from content as a leader is authenticity of my experiences, my wisdom, my own human, my human experience that I bring to the table that no content could ever replicate.
So, Lim, I'm going to jump in here on that too, right?
Yeah.
Because authenticity, a big word, right? In AI right now.
Yeah.
It can provide this, but what it doesn't provide is that. And what brands need and what companies need is that authenticity, that genuine. So drill down a little further on that in terms of, listen, to me, I think you're authentic or you're not. I'm not so sure you can buy it at Macy's, but where do you think authenticity should show up in a leader today?
Well, I think authenticity shows up in core values as a leader. It shows up in truth, honesty, integrity. Can we teach an AI bot to do that? I know a lot of folks are talking to them and maybe they think they're getting those qualities, but it's basically telling you what you want to hear to a certain extent, right? So first, as a leader, knowing what your core values are, how you represent those core values, alignment of actions and words, because our employees are always watching us in terms of that alignment between actions and words, being transparent in terms of decision making. And I think one of the most important roles of an authentic leader, and I do want to address a myth of authentic leaders, certainly in this day and age that we're in, is that authentic leaders are soft or they don't deliver. Well, I think that's a bunch of, crap versus another word I might use, because authentic leaders are always about performance and the bottom line and delivering to outcomes. But they are developing the leaders that are beneath them. And I think that is a core quality of authentic leaders, that it's never about you. It's about the team. It's about the leadership. It's about the organization and how you are helping others to achieve their personal and professional goals as well. I think that's more important than ever when we are just being bombarded with this technology and the access to data and to content of, frankly, what's real anymore? What's the human component? I mean, I'm team human all the way, and I'm a technologist. So I don't want to lose the humanness or the humanity of who we are as a society because of a technology. So it's our job, and this is why I recently joined the Global Council of Responsible AI as the Chief Strategy Officer. It's our job to establish the guardrails and the frameworks at which we'll operate and leverage the technology in our organizations today.
But how do you bake that in? And again, parallel to the book, Only Woman in the Room, women feeling as if they need to be tougher, right, to be in the room, or men as well, or you need to be tough. There's a old manual from years and years ago that you need to be hard driving and tough and mean, et cetera, et cetera. So back to that melding of authenticity, genuineness, and humanness. Do you have an example where that shows up, where that showed up for you, where that showed up for a leader that you were working for, where it made a difference?
I don't think this is necessarily, a male or a female, traits, because frankly, I've worked for some horrible female bosses. These are some of the stories in the book. And I think part of that is this cultural upbringing that we have, that if I make it, I'm threatened by helping anyone else make it to where that level is as well. So my job is to make sure you don't make it, because I want to sustain my place at the executive table. That is something that we as a community, whether it's women, minority leaders, et cetera, we have to stop that. And part of it is elevating the leaders around you. And when you are the only sitting at the table, your job should be to reach behind you and pull others like you to the table. And, I say this a lot, and the men that are joining the call, I'm so grateful that you are, because frankly, I wouldn't have got where I am in my career without male allies. So, I cannot the importance of male allies in certainly helping women and other diverse leaders get to the executive table or help them achieve their professional goals is extremely important and still important today. So I don't think it's a male or female leadership trait of whether you're an authentic leader or not. I've had both men and female leaders that are fantastic and some that have sucked, frankly. So what do you learn from those leaders? I think is the biggest takeaway there. And when I grew up in Department of Defense, I came out of college as a computer engineer. I started working for DOD. I'm going to keep calling it DOD and not DOW. When I started working for DOD as a high school senior, I then spent 26 years in the Department of Defense. So I grew up literally out of college and in my 20s, certainly male-dominated environment, watching and observing leaders. One thing the government does extremely well, certainly when I was in government, is a lot of management and leadership development. Very similar to what the military receives. You get that in the Department of Defense, if anybody on our call has been a government civilian. And part of that is observing. What type of leader did I want to be? What were the traits that I wanted to absorb? Which were the ones that I did not? And that really kind of shaped my leadership. Certainly many people, I was meeting with a colleague yesterday and she says, well, you're very direct. Well, yeah, I had to be direct to get my voice heard in terms of what I brought to the table. And bringing that to the table requires another chapter in the book, belief. Belief in who you are and what capabilities. Get really good at what you do so that confidence can come and you can articulate what it is, the expertise that you're sharing around that table. So I was very much shaped as a leader and watched leaders for the first 26 years of my career as I moved up through the IT ranks and ultimately became the CIO in counterintelligence and the CIO for the U.S. Marshal Service, which are really crazy, fun jobs and some crazy stories in the book of some of the things that I had to navigate through.
Lisa, I'm gonna take a look at some of the questions in chat. Open it up to the group. I'd also, even while we're doing that, would love to know what your traits are and what makes a good ally. What makes a good ally as a leader?
I think a good ally is someone who speaks your name when you're not in the room. That also has to do with brand. When you are, and I certainly tell women and leaders that I coach, both male and female, performance is table stakes. Everybody's got to perform and everybody's got to deliver, and you have to deliver flawlessly. Performance and results alone will not get you promoted, right? It's about exposure, brand, relationships, which is another important chapter in the book, connections. These are the things that ultimately get you promoted in terms of working your brand, building your exposure. And what do people say about you when you're not in the room? That's your brand. And like it or not, perception plays a big role in establishing from others what that brand is. And that's why consistency of actions, core values, transparency, all those qualities we were talking about being an authentic leader, those qualities comprise the brand that you bring to the table.
Anybody has a question, raise your hand. I'm going to take one from chat. Can you touch on worker incentives to adopt AI? How are you seeing compensation models change in the teams you work with as AI increases productivity?
Yeah, I'll say this is actually applicable to any type of transformation you're driving, because we all know as we think about change management, which is always the hardest, right? We all have that, culture eats strategy for breakfast. I can have the best darn plan laid out. At the end of the day, it's cultural change. It's a huge change management effort. It's alignment across the organization. Technology is the last thing. And frankly, technology is usually the easiest thing. Once all those other things come in to alignment. So driving that type of change and who owns that change, and then establishing accountability in the organization and incentives. So I would, number one, in everybody's performance plans for the year, there would be an AI goal. There would be a joint project or joint accountability in terms of how those individuals would be evaluated. Whatever the organization decides the prioritization in the implementation of AI will do. There would be a bonus incentive tied to the performance plan that if this outcome is reached, and of course, this has to be decided at the leadership table, but this is how you get buy-in. People do what you measure and reward them for. It goes back, I don't know how many damn years, but it's still true today in the workplace. So if you set up those bonus incentives, you set up any type of pay incentives, you set up the performance incentives, that creates alignment. And that is the infrastructure across the company that will help drive a transformation forward. Otherwise, people are going to do whatever the hell they're going to do, because we all know we're dealing and competing with 100 different priorities during the day. So where do I help people focus? That's our job as leaders, to incorporate those into the infrastructure.
One topic I'm curious, and we've had some others like Catherine Montgomery speak about bias in AI.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering how much of that you're seeing, and how much of this is something that's like yet one more thing that needs to be overcome.
I think it absolutely needs to overcome. And I think that's part of the technology is evolving. I mean, we're really at the beginning of this. I always think of the Gartner hype curves, if any of us use Gartner, in terms of leveraging the technology. And then ultimately, how does it become sustainable and consistent? And coming from healthcare, what I rely on a AI chatbot in terms of decision-making, well, it depends on the workflow. Certainly, if it has to do with a particular patient or member, in terms of the care that they're going to receive, absolutely need a human in the loop. If it's a financial automation, or we're leveraging an AI bot to help with a particular workflow, maybe on the back end in terms of finance or HR, okay. But even look at what some of the data we're now seeing when we're using AI to be the initial reviewer of work applications. Right? So all of these people that have been trying to find jobs, and they're not able to find jobs because HR has now outsourced that capability to an AI tool. Mm-hmm. Right? So I think I read for the first time that there's now a lawsuit. There was a story of a gentleman, I don't know, he applied to, don't quote me on the number, but a couple hundred jobs, was denied every time on the job, and he wound up suing the company. And the company was now held liable because that AI bot or tool was treated as the person who had the bias and was reviewing the applications. So I think we have a long way to go. Certainly as I use the tools, sometimes I think they're getting dumber versus smarter, right? Because I'm getting competing different information back, and I use Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT, and so forth. So I think we have a long way to go. I certainly think of leveraging AI in the roles that, again, team human, how we continue to amplify and value the roles, and what is the role of all of us in the enterprise today when we bring in this technology to help us accelerate, differentiate, whatever the case may be, our company.
I'm also curious if you're seeing any shifts with where the workplace is heading, right? Like, looking out at the next 5, 10 years, where, especially because of some of these shifts in terms of like, more women getting college degrees, and like the kind of advancements that are happening, and a lot there's plenty written by Scott Galloway and others about men being left behind. And so even if we still have these institutional settings like the workplace that are designed for men and biased toward men, you have this, so you do have some of these new discrepancies in education, in some fields, even income, like women.
Transfer of wealth, that's coming in the next 10 years, right, to women.
So how does that affect where things are going? Where do you see that playing out?
It's a great question. And I've been thinking a lot about this question because, frankly, it's like a tidal wave. And I think maybe that is what's causing the fear, or, what word do I use? Kind of the craziness of conversations like women shouldn't vote anymore. I don't know. Every day it's a different crazy one. And you know what? Feminism has always been about equality. It's not one's better than the other, or we need more of this and more of that. Why can't we all just strive so that all diverse voices, because the data has proven that a diverse table delivers better results, period. Right? So the goal should be to strive to bring that diversity to the table, decision-making table. And we've learned, even through regular product cycles, like if I'm delivering a product, building a product, and the only voice I have at the table is one color, one voice, it's not representative of the market today. It's not representative of your customer base. So having that diversity of perspective, experience, and voices at the table, we all know, we've learned this, delivers a better product and a better outcome. And as you talk about that, David, more undergraduate, more masters, more PhDs. What worries me is the pipeline currently. So let's say all that happens and you have a flood of candidates that are now available and entering the workplace. Right now, the data shows, and I have a 23-year-old daughter, lives in New York City, works for the NBA. They say her and a male counterpart start into corporate America at the same time. And they make their way through their careers. And my daughter, Alex, decides, I want to start a family. And she steps away. She takes whatever time off that she's allowed. Her counterpart keeps climbing. And the data shows she never catches up. Right. This is why the wealth chapter is really important for women to understand the consequences. What does it mean to build wealth? How do you build wealth? What are the things you should think about when you're making these life decisions? Because a lot of us weren't taught that, nor understand that. So if women are entering, but we hit this middle, and most women leave the workplace when they start to have a family. So now I don't have women in executive and leadership roles, and this is why I only have 11% of CEOs that are female in this country. So you have to still address the infrastructure to support women in staying so that they reach those middle ranks, keep climbing to the higher ranks, and ultimately get into an executive role. And of course, I say that because at the end of the day, it's choice. choose whatever you want to do. If you want to leave the workplace to go have a family, hallelujah, go do it, right? But if your choice is to continue working, or maybe you have no choice, I need to bring, right, my compensation to the table to support the family, then we should have a supportive infrastructure. So, David, to answer your question, because I get really passionate about this, I'm hoping the tidal wave will force policy change, system change, in order for both partners to succeed, right, in the workplace. And I'll tell you a funny story. I was just visiting Woodstock, New York. First time I went to Woodstock, and I went to the incredible museum up at Woodstock. And you had all of these pictures talking about the 1960s. And, oh my goodness, it like hit me, I was born in 63. It hit me square in the head of seeing what the perfect family was. Dad, mom, the two little kids, the workplace design. Dad went to work. Mom was baking, doing the laundry, raising the kids. This was the patriarchy. Right? And then, of course, you had the rebellion that started after the Vietnam War in 1969 when Woodstock happened. It was fascinating for me to kind of see that and realize, oh, this is how it all began. And it wasn't started out of, of trying to keep women down. It's who we were as a country at that particular time. So what we need to do is evolve that structure and thinking, and companies are responsible for this as well as the federal government, of how do we support, and why is it that we're the only modern industrialized nation in the world that doesn't have family paid leave, right? You go to Finland, you're able to take off for 2 years to raise your family and your children. So we are so far behind in this country in terms of flexible work policy support in the workplace for both men and women that, I think it's important for all of us to raise our voices and say, enough is enough. Let's fix it.
Well, I'm going to bring it a little bit back around to where I started because of that. And you mentioned there's a mass exodus of women in the workforce. There's also a mass exodus of people over the age of 50, 55 with the onset of AI. Like, I'm not doing it. I am an old dog. That is a new trick. I'm not doing it. Time for me to go. I'm all for people taking off at 50 and living the life they lead and travel and do whatever they want, right? But back to, again, I'm thinking about young women coming out of college. Your daughter's going to working in sports, which is fantastic. Is again, I'm looking for those opportunities that AI can crack open the earth while it's making its transformational changes to change the system you're talking about, to change the workforce, to make the paid family leave, all of that stuff. I'm looking for AI to kind of be a wave that we can, at offices, leaders, female leaders, male leaders, can ride, that will use it as a cudgel to affect that change. Do you see any companies or David too, anyone else on the call? Does anyone see that happening at companies anywhere where it's just AI is just completely upended and shifted the workplace in such a way that Lisa's been talking about?
Well, I will share, and this is another call to action. Diverse and women and diverse voices are missing from AI. And if you look across where influence is being driven by AI, they all look the same.
Well, there you go. There's
They all look the same to a certain extent. But the beauty of AI, and I think from the first time from a technology standpoint, it democratizes your ability to get involved. What do I mean by that? Let's say in cloud or digital technologies, I had to be somewhat technically smart. I had to understand the technology. With AI, I don't care if you're a sociologist, an anthropologist, an attorney, all of us have to understand it because it's going to impact us. And it's an opportunity for all of us to bring our voices to the table. That's democratizing our ability from a technology lens that I don't care what your profession is, get involved, understand it, and bring your voice to the table. At most, when I left as a computer engineer, just think about this for a second. In mid 80s, there was about 34 representation of female technologist engineers. Today, we're below 20%. It's going the wrong way, right? So women's voices, diverse voices, and you've heard me say this before, I don't want the seven dudes making decisions of our future and on humanity with the use of AI for the rest of us. This is why all of our voices are so important to say, yay, no, establish guardrails. How are we really going to leverage this technology to benefit humanity? It's important for all of us.
But for those of us who kind of like fear where the trend line is going and reaching our first trillionaire who might espouse some views that maybe women's voting rights are overrated and and not exactly the most participation oriented exec, but in general also, I mean, how much media consolidation is that, right? Like, how many corporations are deciding what food is in our grocery stores and which grocery stores we could shop, right? Like, I go down the street to my local grocery store that is owned by Amazon.
But what changes that, David? What do we do about that?
Right. That's what I'm wondering.
It's so interesting with these trillionaires because we are moving into a society of haves and have-nots. And the wealth expansion at the top 1% is just, oh my God, it's just, can you ever imagine the salaries and, the $1 trillion payouts that are happening today? What do we do about that? How do we change that? First of all, I think it starts with you vote, right? You get out and vote and be the change you want to see, as I say. And that's why I decided to join this Global Council of Responsible AI.
Can you talk about that a little bit more of what you're doing there?
So this is an amazing group. I encourage all of you to go out to the webpage, gcrai.ai, Global Council of Responsible AI. They've been at this for about the last 18 months, and they developed a framework called the Gracie Framework to help enterprises adopt the use of AI. They have global ambassadors. They went to Davos, to the Economic Forum, got buy-in at Davos in terms of using this framework. And those of us that have been in enterprises, certainly from a cyber standpoint, you're probably familiar with what we call the NIST framework that comes out of the federal government. And that NIST framework helps us evaluate and measure our cyber controls and effectiveness in the enterprise. What we're trying to do with this Gracie framework is have it work in an integrated partnership, or not replacing NIST. We want it to work alongside the NIST framework to help enterprises adopt AI controls and guardrails and how they measure themselves in terms of implementation of AI. We're looking for people, David, smart people like you and the people on this call that understand the technology to help us shape the framework, model the framework, and then create adoption, influence at the federal level, because we know what's not happening there. We're also working at a state level and even at a county level. And then we have countries around the world that are all aligned with us and adopting this framework. So I encourage you to go check it out. Love to hear any feedback. If you want to get involved, let me know. Reach out to me on LinkedIn is a way to get a hold of me. Or, I can also drop my email in the text here if someone's interested on that as well. But work has to be done. And David, you said it earlier, in terms of the guardrails that need to be created in terms of the use of this technology.
What's an example of a guardrail?
Example of a guardrail would be probably decision making and the audit and traceability. Can you show the audit flow and the traceability across the workflow in the use of AI? If I have an AI chatbot, can I trace back to the source of the data? Can I have that traceability of that entire workflow to understand where the technology was leveraged? And is there a control in place that allows an enterprise to know what the decision was, why it was, and where the source of it came from? That would be an example.
From what I understand, there's a whole area of interpretability where people who designed it don't really understand how those decisions are made.
Exactly. That's the problem. That's the problem. And what's interesting about that is from a cyber standpoint, if you had implemented any other technology, that would be a cyber control that says, what's the traceability of the workflow? Where was the source of that data? Do you know where it is? And if you couldn't, that would be, you would receive, you would have increased cyber insurance. There were consequences in terms of how your enterprise would adopt the technology to ensure that those things were in place. And the NIST framework is a great framework that's used in terms of cyber effectiveness for a company. We got to do the same thing with AI.
Seems to me that a RAG solution for enterprise would be a solution for that. Like the data that goes in is created by humans and it's always traceable. So you don't rely on it.
I totally agree with you. Right. So we need to make sure that is, because I think many companies are getting into places where they don't know where the hell the data is coming from and they don't understand what the hell the decision was that the bot made.
We're about at time, so I'm going to give you, I'm going to plug your book at the end, The Only Woman in the Room. You could get it on Amazon, Lisa Davis. Read it, write a review. But
that would be awesome. And reach out on LinkedIn. I have a Substack newsletter that I write weekly as well on leadership, certainly leadership in AI. The qualities that I've talked about, the leadership pillars in the book. Love to hear from all of you. And certainly, David, thank you for inviting Kathleen and I, and thank you all for staying with us and in the conversation.
Yep.
Well, yeah, thanks so much for coming. It's terrific, meaty discussion, terrific book too. So one I'm grateful to have read. And I think everyone knows here that not only is it good based on if you're a woman or, not you have to get to your sister or mom or wife or partner, but your brothers, your sons, your uncles. So be a great belated Father's Day present. Yeah.
There you go. I love that, David.
So, yeah, but as I think everyone here can tell, there's a lot we all can learn from you, and appreciate you being able to have some of these tough conversations and getting people talking about some big issues that we need voices like yours being a very loud part of. So thank you for all that. And I look forward to continuing to learn from you and Kathleen. Always amazing seeing you in action. So great having your questions and making all this possible. Come back anytime. And thanks everyone for all your great questions and participation.